Admiral Kethvar gripped the armrest of his command chair as another explosion rocked his flagship. The bridge lights flickered, casting strange shadows across his scaled face. Around him, his crew worked frantically at their stations, trying to keep their battered ship together. "Damage report," he barked, his reptilian voice cutting through the chaos. "Hull breach on decks 7 through 9, his weapons officer replied, her voice tight with stress. "Shield generators are down to 30% power. We're losing atmosphere," in the forward sections. Through the massive viewport, Kethvar could see the remains of his once proud Third Fleet limping through space. Of the 200 ships that had started this campaign, barely 40 remained. Their hulls were scarred and blackened, emergency lights blinking like dying stars in the darkness. The Zephyrian Empire had struck again. Their bioships were unlike anything the Galactic Federation had ever faced. Made of living tissue that could heal itself, these vessels grew stronger as the battle continued. What made them truly terrifying was how they fought together, like parts of one giant mind. No matter what tactics the Federation used, the Zephyrians always seemed to know what was coming next. "Sir, we're receiving surrender demands from the Zephyrian fleet," his communications officer reported. "They want us to power down our weapons and prepare to be boarded." Kethavar's claws dug into his chair. 3 years of war, and this was how it would end. The Federation had thrown everything they had at the Zephyrian Empire, and it wasn't enough. World after world had fallen to their bioships, billions of lives lost, entire species driven to extinction. "Set course for the neutral zone," he ordered. "All ships, maximum burn, we're getting out of here." The retreat was a painful thing to watch. Ships that had once been the pride of a dozen different worlds now crawled through space like wounded animals. The Federation had always believed in unity, in different species working together for the common good. But against the Zephyrians, their diversity had become a weakness. Too many different fighting styles, too many conflicting strategies. As they entered what the star charts called the Terran sector, Kethvar felt a bitter taste in his mouth. This area of space had been abandoned 50 years ago during the First Zephyrian War. The humans who had lived here were declared lost, written off as acceptable casualties. The Federation had made the hard choice to pull back and defend more populated systems. "Admiral," his science officer called out, "we're picking up something strange on long-range sensors." "Strange how?" Kethvar asked, though he wasn't sure. He wanted to know. After the beating they had just taken, any surprise was likely to be a bad one. "There's a massive energy signature near the third moon of the dead world they used to call Terra Minor. The readings don't match anything in our database." Kethvar studied the sensor display. The object was huge, easily twice the size of his flagship, but more disturbing than its size were the power readings. Whatever it was generating more energy than should be possible for something that appeared to be drifting dead in space. Could it be a Zephyrian trap? His weapons officer asked. No. The science officer shook her head. The energy patterns are all wrong. This is technology I've never seen before. As they got closer, the shape of the mysterious vessel became clear on their screens. It was angular and predatory, like a metal shark frozen in the depths of space. Its hull was dark, almost black, with strange lines running across its surface that seemed to pulse with inner light. It didn't look like any Federation design, but it also didn't match Zephyrian bioship patterns. "Sir, should we investigate?" his navigator asked. Every instinct told Kethvar to keep flying. His ships were damaged, his crew was exhausted, and they were deep in what used to be enemy territory. But something about the mysterious vessel called to him. In a war where the Federation was losing badly, any unknown factor might be worth the risk. "All ships reduce speed. Take us to yellow alert," he ordered. "Open a channel to that vessel." "Channel open, sir." Kethvar cleared his throat. "Unknown vessel. This is Admiral Kethvar of the Galactic Federation Third Fleet. Please identify yourself and state your intentions." For long moments, there was only silence. Then the speakers crackled to life, and a voice spoke that made Kethvar's blood run cold. "This is Captain Marcus Chen of the UES Retribution." The voice was human, but changed somehow. It carried an electronic undertone, as if it was being filtered through machines. More disturbing was the casual confidence in those words, like the speaker had been expecting this conversation. "We've been watching your little war," the voice continued. "Quite entertaining, really. But the children have played long enough." Kethavar's mind raced. Humans? Here? That was impossible. Earth and its colonies had been overrun 50 years ago. The entire species had been declared extinct after the First Zephyrian War. "That's impossible," he said. "The humans were wiped out decades ago." A sound came through the speakers that might have been laughter, but it was cold and mechanical. "Wiped out? Is that what you told yourselves? How convenient. Did it help you sleep better knowing you had abandoned an entire species to die?" The words hit Kethavar like a physical blow. It was true, of course. The Federation had pulled their fleets back, leaving human space to the Zephyrians. It had been a tactical decision, made by people far above his rank. Save the core worlds, sacrifice the frontier. "The Federation made difficult choices," Kethavar said, trying to keep his voice steady. "We had to protect the greatest number of lives." "Of course you did," the human voice replied. "And now you're running again, aren't you? The mighty Galactic Federation, defeated by the same enemy you left us to face alone." On the view screen, the dark ship began to move. It turned with impossible grace for something so large, bringing what could only be weapons to bear on Kethavar's fleet. But strangely, he didn't feel threatened. Instead, he felt like a small animal that had wandered into the territory of an apex predator. "What do you want?" he asked. "Want?" The voice seemed amused. "Admiral, we don't want anything from you. You're here by accident, running from an enemy you can't defeat. But since you are here, you might as well witness what 50 years of abandonment can create." The ship's hull began to change. Sections that had appeared solid shifted and moved, revealing weapon systems unlike anything in Federation databases. Energy readings spiked to levels that should have torn the vessel apart. But somehow it held together. "You see, Admiral, the Zephyrians did teach us something valuable. They showed us what evolution really means. Not the slow, peaceful progress your Federation prefers, but rapid, violent change driven by necessity." More signatures appeared on the sensors. Ships decloaking all around them, emerging from hiding places that shouldn't exist. Dozens of them, all bearing the same alien design philosophy as the Retribution. 50 years, Admiral. 50 years of learning, adapting, becoming something new. The Zephyrians thought they were hunting prey. Instead, they created the perfect predator. Kethavar stared at the display, watching human ships materialize from nowhere. Each one was a work of art and terror, designed by minds that had been pushed beyond normal limits. "The war is about to change," Captain Chen's voice echoed, across the bridge. "And this time we're not running." Captain Marcus Chen stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution, though stood wasn't quite the right word anymore. His legs were mechanical now, titanium and carbon fiber replacing flesh and bone lost in the early years of the war. His left arm was completely artificial, connected directly to the ship's systems through neural interfaces that would have killed a baseline human. The bridge around him was a fusion of organic curves and angular machinery, walls that breathed, with the ship's life support systems, consoles that responded to thought as much as touch. It was beautiful and terrible at the same time, like everything humanity had become. "Show them the recordings," he said to his AI companion, a digital consciousness that had once been human but now existed as pure information. "Are you certain, Marcus?" the AI asked. Its voice came from everywhere and nowhere, speaking directly into his augmented hearing. "The truth is difficult to witness. They need to see. They need to understand what their abandonment created." The transmission began broadcasting to Admiral Kethavar's fleet. Images filled their screens, recordings from 50 years ago when the Zephyrian bioships first entered human space. Earth hung in the darkness, blue and green and beautiful. Orbital stations dotted the space around it, busy with the traffic of a thriving civilization. Humanity had been young then, barely 2 centuries since their first steps into space, but they were growing fast. Then the Zephyrians arrived. The first bioships looked almost peaceful as they drifted past the outer planets. massive organic forms that pulsed with their own light. They seemed more like space whales than warships. Human ships moved to intercept them, broadcasting messages of greeting in dozens of languages. The bioships responded by opening fire. Admiral Kethvar watched in silence as human vessels exploded in bright flowers of flame and debris. The defensive fleet fought bravely, but their weapons barely scratched the Zephyrian hulls. When the bioships were damaged, they simply healed themselves, organic tissue flowing like liquid to seal wounds. We sent out distress calls, Marcus's voice narrated, over the images, begged for help from our Federation allies. We were told help was coming. The recording shifted to show massive evacuation efforts. Human ships, never designed for war, trying desperately to carry civilians away from the advancing enemy. Some made it to the jump points, most didn't. 3 Federation fleets were supposed to reinforce us, Marcus continued. They never came. We learned later that the High Council had decided we were acceptable losses. Better to let one species die than risk the core worlds. The images showed the siege of Earth itself. Bioships swarming through the inner system like a plague, consuming everything in their path. Human vessels fought with desperate courage, ramming damaged ships into enemy formations when their weapons failed. But courage wasn't enough. We had a choice, Marcus said. Die as we were, or become something that could survive. The recordings changed, showing the underground facilities that would reshape humanity's future. Scientists working around the clock, pushing the boundaries of technology and biology. Children being born in artificial wombs designed to handle genetic modifications that would have been considered monstrous in peacetime. We couldn't match their healing factor with organic tissue, Marcus explained. So we became something else, part machine, part flesh, part digital consciousness. We uploaded our minds into quantum matrices, stored our memories in crystalline arrays that could survive anything. Admiral Kethvar watched humans transform themselves, bodies enhanced with cybernetic implants, brains connected to computer networks, entire personalities digitized and housed in mechanical shells. It was evolution at its most violent, driven by the simple need to survive. The children adapted fastest, Marcus said, and the sadness in his voice was unmistakable even through its electronic filters. Those born during the siege knew nothing but war. They were raised in zero-gravity foundries, trained from birth to interface with ship systems. By the time they reached adulthood, they were more machine than human. The recordings showed these children as adults, their bodies seamlessly integrated with technology. They moved through their ships like living parts of the machinery, thinking and reacting faster than purely organic minds ever could. We learned to hide, Marcus continued. Phase shift technology that could move our ships between dimensions, cloaking systems that bent space-time itself. The Zephyrians thought they had killed us all, but we were just evolving. The images shifted to show the construction of the Retribution and ships like it. Massive foundries built inside hollow asteroids, powered by artificial black holes that the old humanity would never have dared to create. Ships that existed partially outside normal space, weapons that could rewrite the laws of physics in local areas. We spent 50 years preparing, Marcus said, learning everything we could about our enemy, studying their bioships, understanding their hive mind, finding their weaknesses, and we found them. The recording showed captured Zephyrian vessels, dissected and analyzed by human scientists who had pushed themselves beyond normal physical limitations, beings who could exist in hard vacuum, who could interface directly with alien technology, who could think in ways that organic brains weren't designed for. The irony is beautiful, Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in it. The Zephyrians created their own destruction when they chose to genocide humanity. If they had simply conquered us, enslaved us, absorbed us into their empire, they would have won. But by trying to wipe us out completely, they gave us the motivation to become something they couldn't defeat. Admiral Kethvar felt sick as he watched the transformation. This wasn't the humanity the Federation remembered. The curious traders and explorers who had seemed so full of potential. These were post-human entities, beings who had sacrificed everything human about themselves to survive. Do you understand now? Marcus asked. This is what abandonment creates. When you left us to die, you thought you were saving the greater good. Instead, you created the very thing that will reshape this galaxy. The recording ended, leaving the Federation fleet in shocked silence. Through the viewports, they could see the human ships hanging in space around them, sleek predators that seemed to drink in starlight, vessels that hurt to look at directly because they existed in too many dimensions at once. We're not the same species you abandoned, Marcus said finally. We're something new, something evolved, specifically to destroy the enemy you couldn't defeat. And now that we're ready, the real war can begin. On his screen, Admiral Kethvar could see other human ships decloaking throughout the system. Dozens of them, then hundreds. Each one a masterpiece of technology that pushed the boundaries of what was possible. The ghosts of Terra had returned, and they were hungry for revenge. The Zephyrian biofleet arrived like a living nightmare, dropping out of quantum space with the coordinated precision that had made them the terror of the galaxy. 67 ships, each one a massive organic form pulsing with bioluminescent. Patterns moved as one mind across multiple bodies. Admiral Kethvar watched from his damaged flagship as the enemy fleet spread into their classic attack formation. He had seen this pattern before, in a dozen losing battles. The bioships would surround their target, cutting off escape routes, while their healing factors made them nearly impossible to kill. All ships, prepare for, he began, then stopped, as Captain Marcus Chen's voice cut across all channels. Federation fleet, hold position and observe. Consider this a lesson in applied violence. The UES Retribution moved forward alone, facing down 67 enemy vessels with what seemed like casual confidence. To Admiral Kethvar's trained eye, it looked like suicide. No single ship, no matter how advanced, could face those odds and survive. He was about to learn how wrong he was. The Zephyrians opened fire first, as they always did. Bioplasma cannons erupted across their hulls, sending streams of living energy toward the human ship. These weapons had melted through Federation armor like it was paper, consuming metal and flesh alike with equal hunger. The plasma struck the Retribution and simply vanished. Quantum phase armor, Marcus explained over the "come," his voice carrying the satisfaction of an engineer showing off his favorite creation. The energy passes through us because we're not entirely in this dimension when it arrives. Before the Zephyrians could adjust their targeting, the Retribution returned fire. Its main cannon was unlike anything in Federation databases. Instead of energy beams or projectiles, it fired what looked like small tears in space itself. Black holes no bigger than marbles that expanded as they flew. The first quantum torpedo struck a Zephyrian bioship amidships. Instead of exploding on the surface, it phased through the living armor and detonated inside the creature's vital organs. The ship convulsed, its healing systems trying desperately to repair damage that was literally eating it from within. The second torpedo found its target before the first bioship finished dying, then a third, and a fourth. Each shot was perfectly placed, striking at points where the enemy's healing factor would be overwhelmed by the physics-defying destruction. But the Retribution wasn't alone. Human ships decloaked all around the Zephyrian formation, emerging from dimensions that shouldn't exist, sleek destroyers that moved like living shadows, their hulls rippling with adaptive camouflage. Carrier dreadnoughts that opened like flowers to birth swarms of autonomous hunter-killers. Support vessels that seemed to bend space around themselves, creating fields where time moved differently. Admiral Kethvar had never seen anything like it. The human fleet didn't just fight, it hunted. Each ship moved with predatory grace, targeting not just enemy vessels but the connections between them. They were attacking the Zephyrian hive mind itself. You see, Marcus's voice carried across the battle. We learned something during our 50 years of study. The bioships aren't just individual creatures. They're neurons in a larger brain, connected by quantum entanglement fields. Disrupt those fields. A human ship fired what looked like a beam of pure darkness at empty space between two bioships. Where the beam passed, space itself seemed to crack. The Zephyrian vessels suddenly began moving erratically, their perfect coordination broken, and the hive mind fragments into confused individuals. The battle became a slaughter, separated from their collective intelligence. The bioships fought like animals instead of the coordinated force that had terrorized the galaxy. Human weapons tore through their ranks with methodical precision. Point defense systems that tracked targets faster than organic reflexes could follow. Missiles that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, making them impossible to intercept. One Zephyrian bioship tried to ram a human destroyer, using the classic tactic of sacrificing itself to take an enemy with it. The human ship simply phase-shifted, becoming incorporeal at the moment of impact. The bioship passed through harmlessly, then found itself surrounded by the destroyer's weapon systems as they rematerialized. Impressive healing factor, Marcus observed as the bioship tried to regenerate from the destroyer's assault. But not fast enough. The destroyer's weapons weren't just destroying tissue, they were unmaking it at the quantum level, preventing regeneration by erasing the very information that told cells how to rebuild. It was like watching evolution run backward, complex life forms dissolving into their component atoms. Admiral Kethvar realized his hands were shaking. The Federation had fought these creatures for 3 years, losing world after world to their seemingly unstoppable advance. Watching them die so easily was almost too much to process. A group of bioships tried to escape, their survival instincts overriding whatever remained of their collective will. Human pursuit ships followed them, moving faster than should be possible. These vessels seemed to exist in a state of controlled collapse, using gravity itself as a propulsion system. No survivors, Marcus said simply. We learned that lesson from you, Admiral. Sometimes you have to make hard choices for the greater good. The pursuit ships caught their targets at the edge of the system. Instead of conventional weapons, they deployed something that looked like a silver mist. Where the mist touched the bioships, they began to age rapidly, decades passing in seconds as their cellular structure broke down. Temporal warfare, Marcus explained. We accelerate time locally around our targets, very effective against creatures that depend on biological processes. In less than an hour, the entire Zephyrian fleet was gone. 67 ships that had seemed unstoppable, reduced to drifting debris and fading energy signatures. The human vessels regrouped with the same casual efficiency they had shown throughout the battle. Admiral Kethvar stared at his tactical displays, trying to understand what he had just witnessed. His science officer was running calculations, her face pale with shock. Sir, she reported, according to our sensors, the human fleet never took any significant damage. Their casualty count is 0. 0 casualties against an enemy that had cost the Federation millions of lives. It seemed impossible, but the evidence was floating in space around them. This is just the beginning. Marcus's voice carried a promise that sounded more like a threat. We have 300 fleets like this one, hidden throughout what used to be human space. The Zephyrians taught us to be patient, to plan for the long term. 50 years of preparation, Admiral. 50 years of evolution and adaptation and pure, focused hatred. Through his viewport, Admiral Kethvar could see the human ships preparing to leave. They moved with the same otherworldly grace they had shown in battle, phase-shifting and dimension-jumping like living physics experiments. Where are you going? He asked. To finish what the Zephyrians started, Marcus replied. They wanted to genocide humanity. Now we're going to return the favor. The only difference is, we're going to succeed. The human fleet vanished into quantum space, leaving the Federation vessels alone with the drifting remains of their former tormentors. For the first time in 3 years, Admiral Kethvar's ships weren't running from the enemy, but somehow he didn't feel like celebrating. 3 months after the first encounter, Admiral Kethvar found himself aboard the UES Retribution, walking through corridors that defied everything he thought he knew about ship design. The walls curved in impossible directions, creating spaces that seemed larger inside than outside. Gravity shifted subtly as he moved, adjusted by fields he couldn't see or understand. His guide was something that had once been human. Lieutenant Sarah Walsh, according to her introduction, though the being before him bore little resemblance to the species the galaxy remembered. Her skin was translucent, showing the network of fiber optic nerves beneath. Her eyes glowed with their own light, and when she moved, she seemed to flicker between dimensions. "The captain is waiting for you in what we call the memory core," she said, her voice carrying harmonics that suggested she was speaking on multiple frequencies simultaneously. "Fair warning, it can be overwhelming for purely organic minds." They passed other crew members, if they could still be called that. Beings that existed as clouds of intelligent particles, minds housed in crystalline matrices that hummed with data processing. A few still had recognizably human forms, but even these were changed beyond easy recognition. "What happened to you?" Kethvar asked, trying to keep judgment out of his voice. Sarah paused, considering the question. "We became what we needed to become. The Zephyrians forced evolution on us, but we chose its direction. Some of us uploaded our consciousness entirely, existing as pure information. Others merged with our ship's AI systems. A few maintained biological forms but enhanced them beyond baseline human limitations." She gestured to herself. "I chose a middle path. My body is mostly synthetic now, but my mind remains anchored in quantum biological neural networks. I can interface directly with the ship's systems while retaining something resembling individual identity." The memory core turned out to be a vast spherical chamber at the ship's heart. The walls were lined with what looked like crystalline trees, each one pulsing with stored information. In the center, Captain Marcus Chen waited, his form more machine than man, but somehow still recognizably the person who had once commanded human vessels. "Admiral," he greeted, his voice echoing from speakers throughout the chamber. "Welcome to what remains of humanity's collective memory. Every thought, every experience, every moment of our species' transformation is recorded here." Kethvar looked around at the impossible architecture. "This is beautiful and terrible at the same time. An accurate description of what we've become." Marcus gestured, and images began forming in the air around them. "These are the reports from our campaign against the Zephyrian Empire. Perhaps you'd like to see what your abandonment has accomplished." The images showed human fleets moving through space with deadly purpose. Zephyrian strongholds that had stood for centuries crumbling under weapons that rewrote the laws of physics. Bioships fleeing in panic from an enemy they had never expected to face. "We don't just fight them," Marcus explained. "We erase them. Every ship, every settlement, every trace of their existence. We've learned from their own tactics, the complete extermination of a species down to the last individual." "That's genocide," Kethvar said quietly. "Yes," Marcus agreed without hesitation. "Just as they attempted to commit against us. The difference is, we're succeeding." More images flowed past them. Zephyrian worlds burning, their bio-cities dissolving, under temporal weapons that aged them to death in moments. Entire star systems being consumed by artificial black holes, leaving nothing behind but empty space. "The irony is exquisite," Marcus continued. "They created us to be the perfect counter to their own nature. Every advantage they possessed, we learned to overcome. Their healing factor, their hive mind coordination, their adaptive biotechnology, we developed specific countermeasures for all of it." Kethvar watched the systematic destruction of an empire that had seemed unstoppable just months ago. "At what cost? Look what you've become. Are you even still human?" Marcus was silent for a long moment, his glowing optical sensors dimming slightly. "That's the question, isn't it? We saved our species by transforming it beyond recognition. Most of baseline humanity is gone now, replaced by post-human entities that exist as much in digital space as physical reality. The images changed, showing the remnants of human worlds. Cities that existed in multiple dimensions, populated by beings that flickered between states of matter. Children who were born as digital consciousnesses and chose their physical forms like clothing. Families where some members existed as pure information, while others maintained organic bodies enhanced beyond natural limits. "We are powerful beyond anything the galaxy has ever seen," Marcus said. "We can manipulate space and time, create and destroy matter at will, exist in states that defy conventional understanding of life itself. But are we still the species that once dreamed of exploring the stars together with other civilizations? Sarah Walsh stepped forward, her translucent form shimmering. We remember being human. We carry those memories, those values, those dreams. But we've evolved beyond the limitations that once defined us. Is a butterfly still a caterpillar? The Federation faces a choice, Marcus said, turning his attention back to Kethvar. You can accept us as we are now, your partners in rebuilding the galaxy after the Zephyrian threat is eliminated. Or you can treat us as you did 50 years ago, as an acceptable loss to be abandoned when convenient. The threat in his words was subtle but unmistakable. The human fleet wasn't just winning against the Zephyrians. They were demonstrating capabilities that made them the dominant power in the galaxy. Any civilization that opposed them would face the same systematic extinction they were visiting upon their former tormentors. We don't want to rule over other species, Sarah added, perhaps sensing Kethavar's concerns. We want to return to our role as explorers and traders, sharing the galaxy with our neighbors. But we'll never again allow ourselves to be vulnerable to abandonment or extinction. What does that mean practically? Kethvar asked. It means the post-war galaxy will be very different from what came before, Marcus replied. Humanity will be acknowledged as an equal partner in all major decisions. Our territory will be respected, our people protected, and any threat to civilized space will be dealt with using the full extent of our capabilities. The images around them shifted to show human ships patrolling space lanes, their very presence ensuring peace through the promise of overwhelming force. It was a kind of protection, but also a form of control that made Kethvar uncomfortable. You're asking us to trust you with the power to reshape reality itself, he said. No, Marcus corrected. We're telling you that we already have that power. The question is whether you choose to work with us or against us. We'd prefer cooperation, but we've learned to survive either way. As if to demonstrate his point, Marcus reached out with one mechanical hand and touched the air. Space folded around his fingers, creating a small rift that showed distant stars. Then he closed his fist and the rift disappeared. We've become something that can no longer be ignored, dismissed, or abandoned, he said. The galaxy wanted us gone 50 years ago. Now you'll have to live with what that abandonment created. Kethvar looked around the memory core one last time, at the impossible technology and the beings that were both more and less than human. The Federation would have to make its choice soon, and he suspected the decision would define the future of every species in the galaxy. The children of Terra had grown up and they would never be victims again. The end came not with a final battle, but with silence. Admiral Kethvar stood on the observation deck of his rebuilt flagship, watching the last Zephyrian bioship dissolve into quantum foam. The human temporal weapons didn't just kill, they unraveled their targets from existence itself, ensuring that nothing could regenerate, adapt, or evolve countermeasures. Sensor sweep confirms total elimination, his science officer reported. No Zephyrian biosignatures remain in this system or any other. The species is extinct. 6 months. That's how long it had taken humanity to accomplish what the Galactic Federation couldn't achieve in 3 years of war. The Zephyrian Empire, which had seemed unstoppable, had been systematically erased from the galaxy with methodical precision. Through the viewport, Kethvar could see human ships moving through the debris field. They weren't scavenging. They were cleaning, using their reality warping technology to break down the remaining organic matter at the molecular level. Nothing would be left to chance. No possibility of regeneration or resurrection. It's over, he said quietly to himself. No, came a familiar voice from behind him. Captain Marcus Chen materialized on the deck, his form more digital projection than physical presence now. It's beginning. Over the past months, Kethvar had watched Marcus transform further. The man who had once been recognizably human now existed primarily as a quantum consciousness, appearing wherever his attention was needed across multiple ships simultaneously. It was impossible to tell which version was the real Marcus Chen anymore. The Zephyrian threat is eliminated, Marcus continued. Now we rebuild, but the galaxy that emerges will be very different from what came before. Through the communications, network reports were flowing in from across known space. Human fleets were establishing patrol routes along major shipping lanes, Former Zephyrian worlds were being claimed and converted into something that defied easy classification. Part military base, part research facility, part interdimensional gateway. The Galactic Federation Council wants to meet with you, Kethvar said. They're ready to discuss terms for post-war cooperation. Marcus's projection smiled, an expression that was somehow more unsettling than reassuring. Terms? Admiral, I think there's been a misunderstanding. We're not requesting permission to exist. We're informing you of the new reality. As if to emphasize his point, space around them began to change. Stars that had been distant points of light suddenly seemed closer, their positions shifting as human technology manipulated local space-time. It was a casual display of power that would have been impossible just months ago. We're establishing the Terran hegemony, Marcus explained. A new political entity that will ensure humanity's security and promote stability throughout the galaxy. Membership will be offered to all peaceful species. And if they refuse, then they'll be left alone as long as they don't threaten others. But they won't be protected either. The galaxy is becoming a dangerous place, Admiral. Best to have powerful friends. Over the following weeks, Kethvar watched the transformation unfold. The Federation Council meetings were unlike anything in galactic history. Human representatives who existed as pure information. Beings that could split their consciousness across multiple bodies. Entities that spoke in harmonics that bypassed language entirely and communicated meaning directly. Some species adapted quickly to the new reality. The insectoid hive clans, with their collective intelligence, found common ground with humanity's networked consciousness. The energy-based ethereals appreciated the humans' exploration of post-biological existence. Others struggled. The proud Ceridian Empire, Kethvar's own people, had difficulty accepting that their military might was now irrelevant. Several smaller species retreated to their home systems, choosing isolation over integration. But resistance was futile in any meaningful sense. Human technology had advanced beyond anything the galaxy could comprehend. Ships that existed in 11 dimensions simultaneously, weapons that could edit the fundamental constants of physics, defense systems that operated by altering probability to itself. A year after the war's end, Kethvar found himself serving as the Federation's liaison to the Terran hegemony. It was a position that required him to spend time on human worlds, experiencing firsthand what his former allies had become. Earth itself was perhaps the most dramatic example. The planet existed simultaneously in multiple dimensions now, its surface hosting environments that defied natural law. Oceans that flowed upward into the sky, forests where the trees existed as pure mathematics, cities that were built from crystallized time itself. The humans who lived there were equally transformed. Children who were born as digital consciousnesses, in quantum computers, choosing their physical forms as they matured. Adults who existed as distributed intelligences across multiple bodies, their thoughts flowing through networks that spanned star systems. Do you miss what you were? Kethvar asked Sarah Walsh during one of his visits. She had continued to evolve, her form now more pattern than substance, a living equation that danced through 11-dimensional space. Do you miss being a single-celled organism in primordial seas? She replied, her voice coming from everywhere and nowhere. Evolution doesn't mourn what it leaves behind, it celebrates what it becomes. But not all of humanity had transcended so completely. In the outer colonies, Kethvar found communities that maintained more recognizable forms, choosing to enhance themselves gradually, rather than abandoning biological existence entirely. These populations served as bridges between post-humanity and the rest of the galaxy. We remember what it was like to be limited by flesh and fear, one of these bridge humans told him. That memory helps us relate to species that haven't made the transition yet, but we also know what's possible when those limitations are overcome. The Terran hegemony's influence spread with surprising gentleness. Rather than conquest, they offered advancement. Trade routes protected by ships that could move faster than light itself, technologies that could solve energy crises, cure diseases, extend lifespans beyond natural limits, scientific knowledge that opened entire new fields. of study, but always with the underlying understanding that this generosity came with expectations. Species that joined the hegemony were protected, but they were also watched. Conflicts were resolved quickly and definitively by beings who could manipulate reality itself. Peace, but at the cost of absolute human supremacy. 2 years after the war, Kethvar walked through New Geneva, the hegemony's capital city that existed simultaneously on Earth and in quantum space. Around him, representatives from dozens of species conducted business with post-human entities, their interactions facilitated by translation systems that operated on the level of pure meaning. He thought about the choice his people had made, and the choice every species in the galaxy now faced: join the new order and prosper under human protection, or remain independent but vulnerable in a universe where humanity controlled the fundamental forces of existence. It wasn't really a choice, at all. "You seem troubled," Marcus Chen said, appearing beside him as they walked through a garden where flowers bloomed in colors that existed only in 11-dimensional space. "I was thinking about irony," Kethvar replied. 50 years ago, the Federation abandoned humanity to save itself from the Zephyrian threat. Now humanity has saved the galaxy from that same threat, but in doing so, they've made themselves the dominant power. We traded one master for another. "The difference," Marcus said, "is that we remember being the victims. We know what it feels like to be abandoned, to face extinction alone. That knowledge shapes how we use our power. And if future generations forget that lesson?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment, his projection flickering as he considered the question across multiple quantum states. "Then the galaxy will have to hope that evolution continues, that something even more powerful emerges to keep us in check. But that's a problem for species that haven't been born yet." They walked in comfortable silence through the impossible gardens, past fountains that flowed with liquid starlight and trees that grew in the shape of mathematical equations. Around them, the business of the galaxy continued under humanity's watchful protection. The children of Terra had kept their promise. They had returned, and nothing would ever be the same. But as Kethvar watched post-human entities conducting the affairs of a dozen species with casual omnipotence, he wondered if salvation and subjugation were really so different after all. Until the end, humanity had won everything, and everyone else had learned to live with the consequences of the choice they'd made 50 years ago, when they decided that some species were acceptable losses. The galaxy would remember that lesson for a very long time.